that section so that we can get everybody's questions asked. At the end, hopefully there will be some times to turn on your camera if you have questions as well. So let's practice that chat function. You know, I love some Family Feud, and a lot of us are going to go on vacation soon, probably, maybe. And here is the question. So it's the top 5 answers on the board. The top 5 answers on the board for this question. Name something from your home you might miss while you're on vacation. Name something from your home you might miss while you're on vacation. I see a lot of answers coming in already. We've got the pet. Oh, everybody loves their pet. Their bed. Okay, look at all these pet lovers. I didn't know my change agents were pet lovers. That's wonderful. Okay, bed, my own bed, cats, my kitchen, nothing. All my clothes. These are great answers. Okay, so it looks to me as if people know how to work that chat function. Okay, so here are the answers in order. Number 5 is computer. Number 4 is their TV. Number 3 is family. Number 2 answer is my bed. And the number 1 answer of name something from home you might miss while you're on vacation is pets. So we saw that a lot in the comments section. So thanks for playing along. Be sure to use that comment section if you need it. I did want to talk to you a little bit about next year's theme. I'm pretty darn excited about it. So I wrote a little something up. So next year's theme is a whole new world. That's the theme. A whole new world. And this is what I wrote about it. In the infinity of time and space, we learned rather quickly how things can change. The last 2.5 years have been filled with sadness and grief, challenges, stressors, frustrations, making us push ourselves into new, innovative ways of doing things. Innovative ways of doing everything. But as the dust settles and we crawl through the end of this pandemic, a whole new world is forming. So many things have changed, and there are now creative new ways of doing things and hopeful, fresh new beginnings. This new year will focus on our new world after a historical pandemic. And there's already some speakers in place, and I did want to talk to you about that. I have been getting some concerns that people are not getting their constant contact on the listserv. If that is you, a couple different things that you should know. One, sometimes constant contacts, because it's such a large email, goes into junk emails, so be sure to check there. But also, I wanted to share with you that our MC3 website, literally just punching in MC3 Milwaukee, will pull up all the information that you need. We have a little website committee now, and what they do is they keep that website up and running. And so what happens is you'll go to the homepage, it will give you a little blurb about what the next change agent meeting is, and then in a little button it will say for more details, and then it will have the actual constant contact. So you always have the constant contact at your fingertips if you need it. Also, don't forget to go into the events page. That will give you all the different things and the different speakers that are happening throughout the year. Okay, a couple of things that you should know. One is we have been approved to come back together again. And so that is so exciting. But what I'm hearing is some of my change agents are saying, please don't change it. I love having virtual meetings because that means I can attend them anywhere. And then I've got another group of change agents saying, oh my God, when can we come back together again? So in order to make everybody get a little something of what they need and make everybody happy, we've decided to do all through the winter months virtual. And then when we hit May, so I think it's May 24th, we have our first in-person change agent meeting. And I have lined up a pretty good speaker for that. So that will all be revealed. I'm hoping to have the schedule done before I leave on my holiday break, and that is right around December 19th. So if that gives you a time frame. Okay, so that's all about MC3. I want to talk to you a little bit about our speaker today. John Little is from Alverno College. He has been teaching for over 30 years and teaches several courses with health humanities focus, including bibliotherapeutic applications and the topics of caregiving and care receiving, perspective switching, building empathy, and stress reduction. He recently created a health humanities specialization at Alverno and is hoping to expand it into a major and minor. He can update you on that. I wanted to just uh, talk to you about uh, something that somebody wrote about his class because this was shared with me. And so after I read it, I thought, John absolutely needs to come and end our year of change agents of the whole theme of being the story of us. That has been our 2022 theme. So when I read this quote, I'm like, John has to come and speak to the change agents. So the quote is, this is from somebody who took the nursing course section. I have found so much inspiration and power through all the readings and assignments throughout the semester. I have always heard the saying to not just be inspired, but to be inspirational. And this course has taught me the true understanding and meaning of that. I am motivated to make a difference and to be the change that I want to see. I am grateful for all the experiences, moments of happiness, moments of sadness, moments of overcoming that I have been able to witness this semester through reading and responding to poems, short stories, and essays. And so that pretty much sums up exactly what I was hoping would happen here today with the change agents and John. And so can you please, everyone, help me welcome John? You can use your clap emoji or just say welcome in the comment section. So enjoy your afternoon.
Okay, thanks everybody. I'm really excited to talk to you today. I'm very excited about this new topic. And a lot of my students say, what the heck is bibliotherapy? And I think by the end of today, you'll have a really good idea. And it's basically just therapy through reading. That's new, it's wonderful, and it's powerful. And I also liked meeting Jackie today. She said that she had in my class 20 years ago, so that was wonderful. It's always great to meet former students from Alverno. Thank you. So the title of my talk is How Can Stories Heal Us? A New Way of Looking at Bibliotherapy and Expressive Creative Writing Therapies. And the learning outcomes of the talk, and by the way, as Amy already said, that you can add your questions to the chat and I can answer them as we go. I like to have a conversation as well. So you'll learn a little bit about my perspective, who I am, what my research interests are, what my teaching perspective is. You'll learn about what the health humanities are if you haven't heard about them, and potential benefits for you as healthcare workers in behavioral health. And part 3, learn about bibliotherapy, including its history and how it's practiced. It's practiced all over the world. It's really gaining a lot of traction. Part 4, engage in reading and creative writing, bibliotherapeutic exercise that I do with my students, and they really enjoy it. But I think actually, doing it will help teach you what it is more than what I'll just tell you. And part 5, I'll ask you to reflect a little bit on your experience today with bibliotherapy and creative writing and see what you think. And then I'll put in a plug for Alverno's new online courses in this field with badges and certificates. Okay, so who am I? Well, my background is I've created and teach 3 new courses and a new specialization in the health humanity at Alverno College, especially popular with nursing students and social work students. I have designed a new 3-course, online badges and certificates, adult education in the health humanities, and I'll talk more about that at the end of my talk. I have published articles and given presentations at professional conferences on bibliotherapy. And right now I'm writing a book called Healing, Reading Through the Body. And I've already published a key chapter in a literary journal called Haruki Murakami's 1Q84, Healing Through Literary Transformation. A little bit more about my research. My wife, Rena, she is a professor of art education at Texas Tech University, and I have been invited to submit a chapter for this book. It's called In Pursuit of Well-Being, Practical Approaches for Honoring the Whole Person Through Art Education. Our particular chapter is titled From Empathy to Compassion, Embodying the Yellow Wallpaper Through Interdisciplinary Learning. And I'll talk a little bit about that today. I've been invited by Oxford University faculty Emily Troscienko to review her latest article called Quantitative Methods for Group Bibliotherapy Research, a Pilot Study. She's been an inspirational figure for me in my own research, and I just love emailing her back and forth. Currently, I'm mentoring a senior nursing student at Alverno, and she's done a wonderful job putting together a research project, creating a psychiatric nursing healthcare plan for outpatient care using bibliotherapy. She took some of my courses. And I'm very honored to speak with you today. I deeply admire your work to address what I think is the crisis of mental health in this country, in this city. I look forward to finding out more about what you're up to, what you do in the future. And thanks so much to Amy for inviting me. So, how did I get interested in the health humanities? When I speak, people often ask me that. I'm having a hard time reading this slide. It's kind of small. So about 12 years ago, I went through a depression, and I had been interested in reading. I don't know if anyone's heard of the Japanese writer Haruki Murakami. And so I ordered his 1,300-page novel, and it's about an alternate reality. And every day I would come home from work and look forward to reading another chapter. I feel, and I don't know how many people have this experience, but it kind of was an aid for me to recover from depression, along with other treatment, professional treatment. And it started me on this journey of trying to think about how can literature potentially be healing. And then I read this interview with Murakami where he said, unless my novels are healing to my readers, then they're not successful. And I just went, wow, that's amazing. I've never thought of literature in that way. And I think actually it's a template for all literature that is kind of not talked about enough. In other words, why do people read? Why do they keep going back? A lot of different reasons, of course, but one of them might be self-healing. So this story, 1Q84, very long, but it's about someone who suffers from crippling anxiety. And the way he overcomes or transforms himself or makes himself healthy is by writing and reading a story, which is interesting. And so at the end of the novel, he says he's able to look out on Tokyo there without an internal backflow of experience. I know that's a complex phrase, but I think if anyone's gone through a depression, you know what he means. And I just found it a wonderful novel. So what are the health humanities? This is a very concise formulation by Paul Crawford. He says, the health humanities, like the medical humanities before them, addresses the way in which the humanities disciplines may be involved in exploring more richly textured ways of understanding healthcare as a practice and understanding health, illness, and care in relation to subjective experience. And I think if you understand that, that's kind of the nutshell of what health humanities is, taking the wisdom of literature, philosophy, religion, history, and aiming it or targeting health. And it definitely opens up a new way of talking about healthcare and also kind of addressing the whole person, not just the biomedical. Just a little bit more background about health humanities. It's basically a new kind of field, and it evolved from the medical humanities, which began in medical schools in the early 70s to help train medical students to better understand their patients. They still do, they have medical humanities courses all over the country in med school where they read plays and essays and novels about both being ill, but also about what it's like to be a doctor. And the stated reasons for why this is a course in medical school is that it helps medical students sort of realize their biases and assumptions. It brings that into focus. It heightens their power of awareness. And reading literature requires definitely critical thinking and empathic awareness about moral issues in medicine. So it's very closely linked at times to bioethics or medical ethics. And what I really, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but somebody has a question in the chat, and I didn't want to get too far before it got answered, and they were asking about the first book that you talked about. The question is, so is it written like a school book, or are there true stories in it?
You mean 1Q84?
I believe that's what they were talking about.
Oh no, it's a novel. It's definitely a work of fiction and fantasy. And if you want me to talk a little bit about the plot, he is suffering from anxiety, but he becomes a writer of another manuscript, and that puts him into an alternative reality. And his whole quest, really, in the novel, along with someone else, is to get back to reality. And it's a wonderful, compelling narrative. So I would recommend it. And we read it in my book club and they loved it too.
Okay, thanks, John.
You're welcome. What I really like about the medical humanities or the health humanities is that the medical humanities I'm fine with, but it's a little hierarchical top down. But now the health humanities is taking all these principles and giving it to anyone working in healthcare or with health. And that's, I've kind of plugged in. I've kind of plugged in to that whole field, and there are health humanities majors and minors throughout the country. And I'm hoping to grow that at Alverno. I've already started with a specialization. And what's interesting about it too, it's not just academic, you know, there are whole new jobs now in the health humanities that are being formulated. You know, as Amy mentioned, everything's changing. And I just came across one the other day where there's Massachusetts General employed a writer in residence. So the writer in residence helps the staff if they want to come and work on essays or talk about literature or create journals. It's been proven that these techniques are very good at reducing stress and burnout. So this is, the first wave of something I think you'll see more of. And I was just looking in, I can't remember where I saw this, but I was just astounded by this. It's in a job listing for Director of Humanities and Medicine at the Mayo Clinic. And let me just read this to you because I think it's really, really interesting. The director collaborates with the program director to develop curriculum and facilitate programming, implementing best practices, enterprise for a wide variety of audiences. Audiences include medical students, residents, fellows, allied health and nursing students, as well as all levels of practitioners. Humanities medicine programming also is designed and delivered to hospitalized and ambulatory patients and the community at large. So that's really fascinating to me, that it's not just talking about the students, but now these humanities programs are going right into the community. And my students talk about that too, how wonderful this is. And I think the whole system of healthcare is moving toward this as well for reasons that I'll talk about. So my specialty is on bibliotherapy. So let me drill down into what that is. Feel free to ask any questions here. Basically, quite simply, it's just the therapeutic uses of literature. That's it. And there are many different forms of bibliotherapy. But for my presentation today, I think it's very important to distinguish between two kinds of bibliotherapy. One is clinical bibliotherapy, which relates to health professionals, psychiatrists, psychoanalysts, and so forth, using bibliotherapy to treat specific mental health problems. And then there's also developmental bibliotherapy, which is used by teachers, librarians, trained volunteers to help others in beneficial ways related to self-care and wellness, including reading therapy and interactive bibliotherapy, where you would read a book in a group, kind of like a book club, and then discuss it with some therapeutic interactions. Both forms of bibliotherapy are used in a wide variety of settings, including therapeutic reading groups, palliative care, prisons, public libraries, schools, community centers, assisted living, senior centers, and healthcare settings, especially in Europe and England. A brief history of bibliotherapy. The ancient Greeks and Romans recognized the healing potential of books, and in a Thebe library above library was the inscription, "The healing place of the soul." And in early 19th century, reading was considered important for treating mental health in United Nations, in England and in Europe. And by 1900, libraries had become part of nearly all European mental hospitals. See, in 1900, bibliotherapy became a facet of librarianship in the US. Therapeutic standards for hospital libraries were published in the 20s, and reading therapy was used for mental health treatment or shell shock after World War I, now called PTSD. So now there's a whole field of bibliotherapy, credentialing bodies, the National Federation for poetry therapy, while at the same time, I think the link between librarians and bibliotherapy is going away, or it's being diminished. I just would like to talk a little bit about, I'm not going to get too far into the theoretical mechanisms of bibliotherapy, but I think it's very interesting to talk about. I mean, Aristotle talked about catharsis and everything, but this was a dissertation that I think her name was Carolyn Schroeds. Unfortunately, it was never published, but all bibliotherapy critics quoted. And it's very important because one thing I always ask my classes is it's clear that it works, bibliotherapy, but why does it work? And I think this, although it's not perhaps the most complete, there's other aspects to it, is very important. So she argued, and from a psychoanalytic perspective, that portrayals in literature become a symbolic equivalent of a personal relationship, a conversation, a mood, a traumatic experience. This evokes the same affective or emotional response as did the original experience. So, in other words, when you read, according to Schroeds, you see a similar experience. You go through a similar experience, and it evokes a kind of cognitive and emotional response. And firstly, you identify with the characters, especially if you like the book, I think. You experience emotional catharsis through the plot and the characters, what's called abreaction, or controlled release of unconscious process. You gain insight into yourself and your situation. So I think that's a wonderfully concise way to go pretty deep into why bibliotherapy or therapy through reading works. Clinical bibliotherapy is, as I said, a more medical intervention or application. It deals specifically with specific psychological problems, eating disorders, anxiety, depression, grief, bullying, PTSD, and many clinical studies that I've read show the palliative or healing effects and improvements in self-understanding, self-esteem, self-expression, interpersonal communication skills, sense of creativity, coping, and adaptive functions. In some studies related to these bibliotherapeutic clinical interventions, they even surpass medication in terms of their benefit. I've already talked about my nursing student, but the other one I didn't mention was School of Life. That's Alan de Botton. If you want to go into a clinical online therapy session, you can. He's a philosopher from England. He established the School of Life, I think about 10 years ago. And it's very carefully set up. So you talk, you go online, you talk to a trained bibliotherapist about your issues, and they'll recommend certain novels to you. And then you'll pick one and you'll talk about that novel, over a period of 6 months to a year. And that's a more, you know, therapeutic or professional application of bibliotherapy. Another one too, and I think it's not that expensive. I think I looked it up. It's like £100. The other one that's dominant in England is called books on prescription. So you can actually get in England a doctor to write your prescription to a bibliotherapy group in your community. Let's say you're suffering from bereavement or depression or grief, you can go to these local book groups led by a professional therapist. I find that fascinating, and I would like to see something like that come here as well. I'll just give you a couple of examples here from my research. And this one took place in Iran. It's a clinical study called Hope and Mood Improvement in Women with Breast Cancer using group poetry therapy. And in this particular study, 29 women patients were undergoing chemotherapy weekly, and they met weekly to discuss and read great Persian poets such as Rumi. And on various scales, they made marked improvements in levels of depression. And the results showed that the poetry therapy had a significant effect in reducing pain and depression and increasing hope. And this little quote here, I just love because I'm always looking for evidence of what makes bibliotherapy, that is reading literature, a little different than cognitive behavioral therapy or psychotherapy. And this one little quote at the end of this research article said, the cancer patients used the mystical themes of Persian poetry to connect with each other. The discussion of poetry was a supportive device for improving mental health and for increasing hope in these cancer patients. My argument is that one phrase, mystical themes of Persian poetry connected with each other, you're not going to find that in a cognitive behavioral therapy session. So this is the value added component that I'm excited about, and it differentiates from regular psychological therapy.
Hey, John,
Yeah, go ahead.
you have a couple of questions in the chat. Is it okay to take a couple right now?
Sure.
Okay. One is somebody asked if bibliotherapy is related to the Bible at all.
I think it is. I think anytime you get together with other people and talk about something that's meaningful to your faith, to your belief system, it's going to be helpful. It's going to be helpful. And it could be the Bible, it could be anything. It could be these Persian Islamic poets as well.
Okay. And
Does that
then
help?
okay. Does that help, Mary? Let us know. And then also, Kara, is there bibliotherapy available in our community?
Well, now there is, thanks to my online courses, you can take those. They're very inexpensive. And what I'm doing today will give you a real taste of what's going on there, but there really isn't. As far as I know, there's no bibliotherapy being offered. And I think it's a shame because it's a proven methodology. It's really popular in England and Europe. And for some reason, I haven't fully understood, it's not here. It's not available.
Okay. And then the last question I have in the chat is, are there many patients who don't know how to read?
That's a good question. It is interesting that I'll talk about this organization in Liverpool called the Reader, and their construction of it is very fascinating because you don't need to know how to read. Some people need to know how to read. So what they do is they sit down and they read a novel or a short story out loud. And then so if you don't know how to read, you could just sit in the group but you're listening to it and you can respond to it very well. So it's not restrictive in that sense. It's kind of like just reading together, and you don't need to know how to read.
Okay, that's all the questions I have for now.
Good, great questions. Yeah. And here it is, the Reader. I think I just like Josie Billington's work so much. She creates a Get Into Reading program. And there's hundreds of groups in the UK. Thanks to her, she's at the University of Liverpool. community centers, libraries, homeless shelters, neurological centers, dementia care homes, drug and alcohol rehab clinics, mental health settings, and prisons. In the article I recently read, she has evidence for how it's so beneficial, year-long program in English women's prison for the participants there. So, one of our quotes was that the people, the prisoners were beginning at the end to tell a new story about themselves. So this process changed something in them that was very powerful. I'll just skip to the bottom here. Fiction and poetry evoke the very feel of the sensory world, the sun on one's face, the rain on one's head, and the sand between one's toes. It can reconnect inmates to occupations they once pursued, such as work in the army, farming, teaching, factory work, their former lives and selves. And that's one thing I'm really interested in, and is how you're activating a sensory experience as you read. So, yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of evidence, as I was saying, of the benefits of all this. And she does another study with depression patients. And as you can see, they really benefit in different ways from read and recover. I love that phrase. I'm probably going to use that at some point in my own writing. And the discussion of the reading helped them more from their focus on their medical condition. These are depressed patients in a hospital, to a close in-tuneness with their fuller selves. I love that phrase too. All right, I don't know if this will play. This is a quick testimonial about their reader.
Let me know, John. I've got yours loaded too.
Okay. If you could play yours, I don't think that's coming up the right thing.
So I'm not sure which one is which.
I think it's the first
okay.
one.
Of the links. Okay. Mm-hmm.
During one desperate search for a book, I chanced upon a poster which said, "Read and relax." Shared reading setup. You read together with people over a cup of tea and discuss what you've read. What was there to not like? I'm Suvi and I'm a reader leader for West London Project. I've been running a group in West London for the last 3.5 years now.
My name is Anne and I've been a volunteer in Croydon for a little under a year now. I've never come across this before and I really couldn't quite make it out. It was partly the notion of reading aloud. So many people aren't very comfortable with reading aloud. And of course, one of the things that you emphasise right at the very beginning is nobody has to read aloud. If you prefer to listen, please feel free to do so. We had 4 days of official training. I thought it was excellent, and I've done a lot of training in my time.
I have the responsibility to bring people together, give them a safe environment and where they can be themselves. People coming from different backgrounds, people speaking different languages can relate to the same text. And in that moment, everyone cares about that text and they have that connection. That's where the magic happens.
The group that I have is an open group in a community centre. Generally speaking, we have people there who are certainly in their 60s, sometimes a little older. I was retired and I wanted to do something that I felt would help me to adjust to my retirement. But very, very genuinely, it's been a huge experience for me. Keeping my brain going, something different, bit of structure. The feedback is about feeling welcome. Comments like, it's the heart of my week.
We had a group of school kids who had come from another charity. We were reading this text, which I had chosen in a way to appeal to the older group members as well as the teenagers. The story was about forging friendship across young and old people, and it just resonated. There were conversations at the same level, the older people and the younger people speaking the same language over that text. So for me, it was a great moment, so much so that the young people wanted to come back. Those human connections, they're so important.
I feel that it's emphasised the importance of community for me. It's about facilitating, encouraging, providing the right kind of platform and environment for people to share their thoughts and to share their humanity.
For those 90 minutes, people are looking to be challenged. I have this wonderful group member who, in spite of her dementia, feels that each week, sitting there, she's doing something meaningful. There is idea exchange on one level, but there's also an opportunity to form bonds. It all stems from a story, which is the starting point of it. How someone connects to it emotionally, how much one wants to reveal. That just sort of, comes out organically, and it's just amazing to watch.
Okay, I think that's a wonderful clip. Yeah, that's good.
And then just so you know too, that there are a couple of questions in the chat too, while you're getting your PowerPoint back up and running.
Oh, okay.
And let me know if you need help with that.
What's the biggest difference between this and a regular book club?
Yes, there you go.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that's a subtle question. I think there are overlaps. I'm in a book club. And a lot of times I think the book club is not as much about the book as about relationships in the group. But in this bibliotherapeutic setting, it depends on what kind of bibliotherapy it is. If it's a directed therapeutic one, they will target certain mental health issues like eating disorders or depression, and they'll pick for the group, books or poetry that speak to that. And that's much different from a regular book club. But I think, to me, what's exciting, that's more a clinical application, but even in the developmental application, which is kind of the way I teach, I do pick things that have a lot of times sort of deep issues of trauma and difficulty. And I have students talk about that, and they talk about how that's therapeutic for them, and they don't have to share their deepest problems, but just voicing some of the things in the story, I think offers a nice therapeutic space. So there are intersections, I think, between the developmental bibliotherapeutic applications and the clinical. And I'm treading those lines myself. I'm not a professional therapist, but I think there are applications you can do that don't target certain mental health issues and don't claim to be therapy, but they are nonetheless somewhat therapeutic. Okay, so. Trying to get my PowerPoint back.
Let me know if you need help.
Okay. Can you see that or?
Nope, not yet.
Oh.
Remember, it's just, there you go. I see.
Oh.
Yeah, yep.
That's it.
And then you can do, it looks like slideshow, or from current slide. Do you see that, John?
Yeah. Quite a ways out.
Did it go too far?
It did. Are you seeing my slideshow?
I am, yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, here's one. I don't know if this will play. It's YouTube about, it's called Literature for All of Us. Didn't play, I guess. Oh, it's just going through. I'm sorry, it's going through automatically.
If it's going and if the sound is irritating you, you can put the actual video on pause
Okay.
and then go back to your PowerPoint. Sometimes that happens to me too.
Okay, here's something called Literature for All of Us. I don't know if you can see the screen, but it's out of Chicago. And
It's
it's
small, but it might pop up.
Okay.
Nope, that one doesn't want to play. Is that the other one that I have, John?
Oh, sorry.
Hey, John.
Yeah.
So there's no sound with that.
Oh,
And it's also very, very small.
yes,
Is that the other one that I happen to have?
you do.
Okay, would you like me to play the second one?
That'd be great. Thanks.
Okay, sure.
I see kids really walled up. I see them angry. I see them not trusting anybody.
They give us like an hour to, get together, read some books, express our minds.
After the book group experience and they get a chance to tell their story, they're different.
I actually look forward to coming to book group. They will ask us questions about, us. We get to express ourselves any way that we can, any way that we want.
We have 6 full-time book group leaders who each can handle 4 to 6 groups a week. We're in about 13 different schools, mostly alternative schools in Chicago, a few after-school programs.
We do more of inviting them to share what's going on in their lives and connecting through literature and seeing themselves in books.
The first day I brought Maya Angelou poetry because I thought that might connect to their lives. And then I had them write poems in response to Maya Angelou. And when they read their poems, they had this switch in their whole posture.
To be able to write about different things, and most of my poems express my thoughts and my feelings. As a young teen mother, it was a great experience for me.
A lot of stuff they give us, we can relate to the type of dialect that the book has, because sometimes the people in the book talk like us.
We are really intentional about the books that we bring to the students.
It gets most of the kids interested here. It gets them more interested in about their literature.
I believe that the whole group session, even though it was literature for all of us, it was still a support group for teen parent and support group for things that was going on with your life. It helped me with my thoughts and feelings. It helped a lot of the teenage girls with their thoughts and feelings, expressing themselves. It take a lot of courage for the guys on the street to open up to a group of people that they don't know.
I appreciate people coming here and like reading with us, being with us, you know, dealing with us.
The personal connections that we make with our students says to them that they matter.
We can tell that the book group leaders genuinely care.
I call them friends because most of the time when we have discussions, they go in on the discussions with us. That's why we feel comfortable around each other, and that's why when we talk, it's a conversation.
I can tell that I was around caring people, so I was able to open up about my feelings. I do believe the program is a great investment and it pays off in a tremendous way. It actually helped me when I was in the teen parent program because I went from like a 7.0 reading score, and when I tested out of there, tested at a 12.0. As a board member now, I am the head of the alum program. I'm a living factor of the payoff.
I think for some of the students that we serve, education or higher education can be somewhat intimidating. And I think that a lot of our discussion opens up sort of a round table or a place for them to talk about what they fear or what they don't feel like they can accomplish.
I am a senior in Second Chance, and I'm looking forward to graduating.
I will be graduating soon in January, and I do plan to go on to college.
It was intense and compact, so that in an hour and a half, over 4 months, the kids would say it changed my life forever.
I'm not gonna have the same mentality as how I used to have. I'm gonna grow up. I'm not gonna be a child keeping my thoughts inside. I'm gonna expand my mind.
Great, thanks.
I'm Susan Noyes.
Let me know if you need help getting your PowerPoint back. Oh, there it is.
There is. Oh.
Yep, you got it.
I don't
Mm-hmm.
know how I did that, but I did it. Okay. So I'm just wondering what people are thinking. I've given you a lot of information about bibliotherapy and different applications, clinical, developmental, education. But I'm just trying to find the chat here. Let's see.
Let me know if you need help with the chat.
Maybe if you could read any
Sure.
responses. I'm just kind of interested. What are you thinking of it?
Sure. Somebody wrote Creative Counseling of Milwaukee in the CCS network does bibliotherapy. They are the only provider that I am aware of at this time.
Ah.
And someone was excited that I got the screen bigger. Does anybody have questions? I can read them out. Or also, John, is it okay if people to turn on their video now and ask a question?
Sure. Yeah.
So if you feel like you'd like to talk to John and turn on your video, please feel free to do that now. Or you can use your raise your hand function too. Okay. Can anyone do bibliotherapy? Do you have to be a therapist to do this? Or is it called something else if you are not a therapist?
Well, that's a good question. Yeah, I mean, there are two different kinds, the clinical and the developmental, and anyone can do it. You can't necessarily, I think, call yourself a bibliotherapist, but you can do therapy through reading, or you can do, I call it health-related reading. So it's mainly targeting health and using, just talking about works of literature, poetry, fiction from a health perspective. It gets people talking.
Mary's curious about do insurance companies pay for this?
That's a great question. I don't know the answer to that. I know they do in England, but I kind of don't think that they do here, but I could be wrong about that. I'm trying, I mean, my next phase is kind of to look at how people in healthcare could access these, both the staff and the patients. And my dream is, of course, to have this in the healthcare system. And at that point, probably could have some insurance coverage.
Someone's saying they must if it's in CCS, I'm sorry.
Okay. Well, that's promising. I'll have to look into that. Okay, well, feel free. I'll just keep going, but pretty soon we're going to be doing our own. Oh, here's some question.
Is there a list of books that are deemed best for working with people who have various traumas, mental health, and addiction issues?
That's a really great question. I know there's a book. It's called Bibliotherapy from A to Z, I think, but I can get you that exact title. It, but it's more informal. It's like bereavement. It's, you know, different life challenges, but it's not structured around various traumas or mental health and addiction issues. In fact, I think that's what people need to develop. And I'm sure there are lists of that in England with the programs there, but I don't think that's easily accessible here. Okay, I'll just keep going. Can you see my screen, everybody?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And these are just some feedback from my students that I've collected over the years. And Amy, I think you read one already. I think you read the first one. And one student said, I described these courses as the silver lining in a cloud. They were extremely therapeutic for me, and I enjoyed making connections with my peers through literature. A student said I was able to discover what bibliotherapy meant, which was a term I never knew existed. And this is a very common experience when taking my classes, that people read in order to feel better or to learn something or to escape or whatever. But they don't know that there's a term called bibliotherapy. And this, we do a lot of work in one of my classes. I don't know if you've heard of the novel, The Fault in Our Stars, about a teenage terminal cancer patient. And it was made into a pretty popular movie a while back. And she wrote, after reading and discussing The Fault in Our Stars, as a future nurse, I plan to be mindful of what the patient is going through and access for their mental health. I plan on incorporating some of the therapeutic techniques in my nursing practice, including exploring feelings, writing, reading, meditation, journaling, and self-made goals for patients to maintain their respect and dignity. And, you know, I just like this last quote from one of Emily Tresenko's studies. She's, after participating in a a clinical trial using bibliotherapy. One of the participants said, I came back from the group in a much better mood. I would listen to my daughter when we read together and discuss what we read. So I mean, my main point is that, you know, there's a lot of literature out there talking about, you know, depression and how that's becoming almost widespread. And there's need for new strategies for delivering efficient and effective treatment for depression. Self-management holds promise as a strategy for identifying, treating, and managing depression. This was from the new Surgeon General's report recently about improving mental health in the workplace. And my point is, it's not there yet, but we can develop a program or programs of bibliotherapy, both for individual readers, but also establish groups that will help people. And one of the benefits of it is it could be a practical alternative for people with limited access to psychological services. Bibliotherapy in all its forms and media-based therapies provide individuals in all age groups and locales with access to affordable and efficacious psychological treatment. So I think the future is bright there. It needs some work to get there, but I think there's a lot of potential here. Just to give you a quick example of a story I use in my class, it's called The Seventh Man, and it's by Haruki Murakami. And in it, as in a lot of his fiction, he talks about the process of overcoming PTSD. And the main character of the story is a man in his mid-50s. He's talking in a small group of people about what happened to him when he was 10 years old, and his best friend was swallowed by a wave while they were on the beach playing in the eye of a storm during a tsunami. It just barely missed me, but in my place, it swallowed everything that mattered most to me and swept it off to another world. I took years to find it again, to recover from the experience, precious years that can never be replaced. And here is kind of the core of the trauma when his friend is swept away in a wave. And here's the passage here where it says, in the tip of the wave, as if enclosed in some kind of transparent capsule, floated Kay's body reclining on its side, but that is not all. Kay was looking straight at me, smiling. There, right in front of me, so close that I could have reached out and touched him, was my friend Kay, who only moments before had been swallowed by the wave, and he was smiling at me. Not with an ordinary smile, it was a big, wide open grin that literally stretched from ear to ear. His cold, frozen eyes were locked on mine. He was no longer the Kay I knew, and his right arm was stretched out in my direction, as if he were trying to grab my hand and pull me into that other world where he was now. A little closer, and his hand would have caught mine. But having missed, Kay then smiled at me one more time, his grin wider than ever. And it was a really awful experience for the narrator. And after that, he can't marry, he can't have relationships, he's traumatized, although he's able to do pretty well at his work. The turning point, and here's where fiction is really good at illustrating the transformation of people from trauma and the healing, was that he went back to his hometown after 40 years and looked at the artwork that his friend Kay had made. And all of a sudden, things changed for him. He says, I might have been making a terrible mistake all those years. As he lay there in the tip of the wave, surely Kay had not been looking at me with hatred or resentment. He had not been trying to take me away with him. And after this realization, he no longer has any PTSD symptoms. He becomes, in effect, himself a storyteller, a kind of storyteller therapist. And he ends with this paragraph that he's talking at the end as the narrator. They tell us that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself, but I don't believe that, he said. Then a moment later, he added, oh, the fear is there, all right. It comes to us in many different forms at different times and overwhelms us. But the most frightening thing we can do at such times is to turn our backs on it and close our eyes. For then we take the most precious thing inside us and surrender it to something else. In my case, that something was the wave. So I'm just wondering, what do people think? What is he saying here about, dealing with trauma? Yeah, finding ways to cope. Yes, finding faith that you can sit with the pain and heal. Exactly. And not turning your back to it. And facing it. Because if you don't face it, things won't work out. Very good. The feeling of not being alone, others have similar experiences. Yes. Excellent, excellent. Okay, so now I'm moving to the second part, which we're going to do a little bit of bibliotherapy on your own, and then do a tiny bit of creative writing as well. And as you probably know, being an artist or participating in art can often be very therapeutic. And in her new book, Creative Arts Therapy Careers, Succeeding as a Creative Profession, and Weinstein writes, creating a work of art is by its very nature a therapeutic practice. We express our fears and hopes through our art. We process our losses, celebrate our good fortune, ponder our existence, imagine loves who might have been, mourn loves who once were. And one of my assignments, one of my classes is to read this short story called The Yellow Wallpaper and have the students rewrite the ending that's in a more positive way. And at the end there, she kind of has a psychotic break, and I'm having them write it where she's more empowered. And I was just amazed at the student responses. Semester after semester, they tell me they found the experience of rewriting the ending, giving her more empowerment. They found it calming and therapeutic. They felt an engagement in creative acts of helping. The narrator was rewarding. I love this one. They noted that becoming an advocate for the narrator and the main character, they were able to reimagine similar situations for themselves. In other words, make applications to their own lives based on what they were doing with their writing. They were able to feel as if they help someone else, they're empathic, and they practice compassion toward the narrator. And it helped them gain a sense of achievement. Well, just a quick point too, there's many different applications of storytelling. And you've probably heard of Ann Bastings. She's a professor at EWM, and she won the MacArthur Genius Award. And she does something wonderful thing called time slips, where she works with older adults with dementia and Alzheimer's. And she goes into the nursing homes and she does a wonderful kind of creative storytelling, a group storytelling. And her big insight was just forget about memory. Let's just improvise. And she was just starting off, and she realized too many of the therapeutic procedures were based on memory. And she just said she held up this photograph she had just ripped out of a magazine of the Marlboro Man and said, "Who is this person?" And they just loved it. They made up stories, they sang songs, and they had a great time. So I think her points are wonderful, that it helps to create joy, these kind of creative storytelling experiences, and a connection, and breaks the isolation that so many people feel. All right, so now I'm going to move into kind of an experiential aspect for you, just to give you a flavor of what bibliotherapy is like. And well, the way I'm going to do it is this. I'll just read you the short story. It's called The Story of an Hour. It was written in 1894 by Kate Chopin. And it's a very surprising story about what happens in the course of 1 hour. And what I'll do is I'll read it, and then I'll have you maybe read through it on your own. Amy's going to put it in the chat for you, give about 10 minutes. And then I'll just kind of lead a discussion working through these questions. What is the story about? Oh, you want to make it large?
John, did you want me to put the story up while you're reading it, or do you just want folks just to kind of relax and listen in?
I mean, I always like to have the story right there in front.
Let me see if I can get that up. You'll just need to unshare your screen.
Okay. So I'll go ahead and read it. If you want to read along, you can, or if you just want to listen, that's fine. But think about, what's the story about, what's happening in it, and just enjoy it. And then I'll ask you to answer some questions. I'll make it a little larger. Yeah.
Let me see if I can get it any bigger. I'm hoping that it. Anybody have any good tricks how to get it bigger?
Well, could they click on it in the chat? And
Amy, did you try to click on the screen and roll your mouse one way or another with the roller button?
With the roller button? Oh, I have not. A right click?
Just make sure you're on that page.
And if everybody X's out of the chat and X's out of the people, the story will take up the whole screen and make it bigger.
Oh, you mean pin it?
Are you talking to me, Amy?
Well, okay. So if you have the opportunity to pin on your screen, you can either pin Jonathan or you can pin the actual image. And how you do that is you just go into the image and then right click and it will say pin it.
And I've also put the link to the story in the chat again.
Yeah.
So that it's more accessible.
So can you guys see
Jackie.
this?
Thank you.
It says pin it. Thanks, Jackie, too. John, are you able to read the story that's on the screen, or is it just too small? Did I lose you?
Looks like he froze, huh?
He did freeze.
It's cold out there.
Well, the good news is we have the story up, so I'll leave it up so people
Yes.
can at least start, because I think he wanted to kind of read it for us. So we'll let him exit out and come back in. Jonathan, did you come back in?
You're on mute.
Oh, am I?
John's on mute.
Oh,
Oh, I'm
There we
back.
hi, John.
Sorry about that. Got kicked off.
Yeah, you did. You got frozen and then kicked off.
Oh, boy. All right, so I'll just read it and just enjoy it. See what you think. Knowing that Mrs. Mallard was afflicted with a heart trouble, great care was taken to break to her as gently as possible the news of her husband's death. It was her sister Josephine who told her in broken sentences, veiled hints that revealed in half concealing. Her husband's friend Richards was there too, near her. It was he who had been in the newspaper office when intelligence of the railroad disaster was received, with Brentley Mallard's name leading the list of killed. He had only taken the time to assure himself of its truth by a second telegram, and it had hastened to forestall any less careful, less tender friend in bearing the sad message. She did not hear the story as many women have heard the same, with a paralyzed inability to accept its significance. She wept at once with sudden, wild abandonment in her sister's arms. When the storm of grief had spent itself, she went away to her room alone. She would have no one follow her. There stood, facing the open window, a comfortable, roomy armchair. Into this she sank, pressed down by a physical exhaustion that haunted her body and seemed to reach into her soul. She could see in the open square before her the tops of trees that were all aquiver with the new spring life. The delicious breath of rain was in the air. In the street below, a peddler was crying his wares. The notes of a distant song which someone was singing reached her faintly, and countless sparrows were twittering in the eaves. There were patches of blue sky showing here and there through the clouds that had met and piled one above the other in the west facing her window. She sat with her head thrown back upon the cushion of the chair, quite motionless, except when a sob came up into her throat and shook her as a child who has cried itself to sleep and continues to sob in its dreams. She was young, with a fair, calm face, whose lines bespoke repression and even a certain strength. But now there was a dull stare in her eyes, whose gaze was fixed away off yonder on one of those patches of blue sky. It was not a glance of reflection, but rather indicated a suspension of intelligent thought. There was something coming to her, and she was waiting for it fearfully. What was it? She did not know. It was too subtle and elusive to name, but she felt it creeping out of the sky, reaching toward her through the sounds, the scents, the color that filled the air. Now her bosom rose and fell tumultuously. She was beginning to recognize this thing that was approaching to possess her, and she was striving to beat it back with her will, as powerless as her two white, slender hands would have been. When she abandoned herself, a little whispered word escaped her slightly parted lips. She said over and over under her breath, "Free, free, free." The vacant stare and the look of terror that had followed it went from her eyes. They stayed keen and bright. Her pulses beat fast, and the coursing blood warmed and relaxed every inch of her body. She did not stop to ask if it were or were not a monstrous joy that held her. A clear and exalted perception enabled her to dismiss the suggestion as trivial. She knew that she would weep again when she saw the kind, tender hands folded in death. The face that had never looked save with love upon her, fixed and gray and dead. But she saw beyond that bitter moment a long procession of years to come that would belong to her absolutely. As she opened and spread her arms out to them in welcome, there would be no one to live for during those coming years. She would live for herself. There would be no powerful will bending hers in that blind persistence with which men and women believe they have the right to impose a private will upon fellow creatures. A kind intention or a cruel intention made the act seem no less a crime as she looked upon it in that brief moment of illumination. And yet, she had loved him sometimes. Often she had not. What did it matter? What could love, the unsolved mystery, count for in the face of this possession of self-assertion, which she suddenly recognized as the strongest impulse of her being? Free, body and soul, free, she kept whispering. Josephine was kneeling before the closed door with her lips to the keyhole, imploring for admission. Louise, open the door. I beg, open the door. You will make yourself ill. What are you doing, Louise? For heaven's sake, open the door. Go away, I'm not making myself ill. No, she is drinking in a very elixir of life through that open window. Her fancy was running riot along those days ahead of her, spring days and summer days and all sorts of days that would be her own. She breathed a quick prayer that life might be long. It was only yesterday she had thought with a shudder that life might be long. She arose at length and opened the door to her sister's importunity. There was a feverish triumph in her eyes, and she carried herself unwittingly like a goddess of victory. She clasped her sister's waist, and together they descended the stairs. Richard stood waiting for them at the bottom. Someone was opening the door with a latch key. It was Brentley Mallard who entered, a little travel-stained, composedly carrying his gripsack and umbrella. He had been far from the scene of the accident and did not even know there had been one. He stood amazed at Josephine's piercing cry, at Richard's quick motion to screen him from the view of his wife. But Richard's was too late. When the doctors came, they said she had died of heart disease, of joy that kills. So take a couple minutes, if you have it on your chat, just to read through it again. I'll give you like 5 minutes or so. And then I'll ask you some questions. Okay, I think you've had a chance to look it over again. I'm really interested in what your responses are to it. So I'll just ask you some questions, and Amy, if it's okay with you, could they speak and
Yep, either anyway, in the chat, or they can raise their hands, or they can
Oh.
even, if it's okay with you, they can turn on their video too.
That'd be great. So I'm just gonna ask you some questions here. First of all, what do you think happens in this story?
I think she went to meet him. That he was the one telling her to open the door.
Who are you talking about?
Mrs. Mallard.
Right.
Her husband was calling her to come to the afterlife with her.
Oh, you think he actually died?
Yes.
Oh, that's one way of reading it. But he seems to return at the end of the story, and it shocks her so much that she herself dies. It was, at least in the literal reading of it, he was not killed in the train accident, and he returns. What do you think, what are some of the conflicts that this character, Mrs. Mallard, is struggling with, do you think, in the story?
Being left alone.
How so? How does that create a conflict for her?
Well, she didn't think she could live without him.
Right.
I almost heard like the stages of grief going through, she was at this emotion and then on to the next, and going through the whole process.
Exactly. And in a way, what do you think is happening to her? I mean, she heard that her husband has been killed. What happens to her when she goes to her bedroom?
I mean, I thought that she kind of realized that she could now like live her own life and that she wasn't able to do that while she was married, but maybe I saw it wrong.
Yeah, that's a good point. And she's seeing new opportunities, new strength for her. And it's just very interesting to me how she, when she first hears the news, she is sort of paralyzed and she doesn't really know what it means. But then when she's up in her room, she sees the tops of the trees with a quiver with new spring life. There are patches of blue sky showing here and there through the clouds. So these are kind of positive images when you'd think that the world had actually gone dark, but it's actually the opposite.
I was thinking, and this is really broad.
Yeah.
But that this was all part of the dying process, that almost like this was a dream as she passed into the next world.
Ah, that's interesting. So she's herself dying at this moment and having a kind of dream-like experience.
Yes.
Yeah, what made you think that? That's a really interesting point.
Oh, who the heck knows? No, I don't know. It's just kind of the way I read it, talking about, the clouds and everything.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. So it's certainly true. I think that she does die at the end. And um, perhaps, as you're saying, this is kind of a process toward that. But it does seem to me that she's gaining a new life, something that she looks forward to, the rest of her life. She'll be free. Um, she looks forward to the years ahead of her. There would be no one to live for in those coming years. She would live for herself. And this sentence, I always ask my students what it means because it's pretty complicated. There would be no powerful will bending hers in that blind persistence with which men and women believe they have the right to impose a private will upon a fellow creature. Did anyone get any idea of what that might mean, that complex sentence?
I felt that was pretty straightforward.
Okay.
We, even from the moment we're born, as mammals, we manipulate each other.
Yeah.
The baby
Yeah.
cries to be fed.
Yes.
The mother cuddles the child to get the child to stop crying. Everything we do almost is trying to get some being, might not be another human being, could be an animal we love, to respond in a certain way.
Yes. Very good. Do you think the husband was a cruel husband, or
No,
why is she
folding of
so?
the kind hands that she'd miss, and then she specified it didn't even matter the intention, even if they were trying to be kind. So I think she meant he was kind.
Yes.
And he was, the will he imposed was in the hope of things being good for both of them. And there's so much to look out for in a marriage. That you
Right.
have a home, you have food, and that you may indeed be imposing your will to safeguard those things.
Exactly. So it wasn't like he was a cruel husband. It was just, this is the natural tendency of people, right? To try to manipulate other people. And do you think she looks forward to a time when she's not subject to his will, whether it's good or
Well, I
bad?
think she's
Yeah.
looking forward to finding her, exactly as she said it, finding herself by herself. What
Right.
is she without somebody else? And I watched my grandmother change a great deal after my grandfather died. She did change a lot. And I watched my mother-in-law lose her husband a year ago. Wow, time flies, like 5 years ago. And her reaction was similar to this woman's. She was happy to be without another person influencing her. She lived her life for her husband and her 5 kids. And now her kids were grown and her husband was dead. And I've watched her do things for herself that I've never seen her do.
Wow. Yeah. So it's similar. That's great. Why do you think she calls this a monstrous joy that held her, a clear kind of exaltation or happiness? Why is it monstrous? Wouldn't it just be a joy without being monstrous?
I think it's monstrous because we've been taught that when somebody we love dies, we are supposed to be sad. And if we're not, we're almost a monster.
Yes, especially women, especially wives in that time period and today as well.
I mean, so much so they thought his death was going to kill her.
Right.
So goes from, we're afraid you're going to die, to they're not going to respond well to her going, oh, I'm really happy about this.
Yes. But nonetheless, despite maybe some guilt there, she's looking forward to living on her own, and she says she can't wait to have self-assertion and this freedom. And her sister seems to think that she's making herself sick, but in fact, she says, I was drinking in the very magic potion of life. And she looks very much ahead to a richer, more independent life, and even carries herself like the goddess of victory coming down the stairs. But what happens is something else. Her husband returns, and I think the last sentence is it's kind of confusing in a way, but what do you think happens? At least it confuses my students. When the doctors came, they said she had died of heart disease, a joy that kills. What do you think that means?
I'm not sure, but maybe they thought that she died from heart sick, like she was so sad about the death that she died. So she loved him so much, the joy of that love killed her when it was taken away.
Yeah. They said she had died of a heart disease. In other words, she was so happy that her heart kind of burst in a way.
Yeah, or brokenhearted that she was not going to have that freedom for many years.
So right away, that's a great difference. Maybe she died of happiness, maybe she died of disappointment, in the sense that she doesn't have the kind of independent life she was looking forward to, this revelation or this freedom. So for me, that's basic point here, is that you can read it however you want, and that's where you can start to live through the story. Did you sympathize with the character Louise Mallard, or was she kind of at a distance for you?
I really sympathize with her. It's kind of funny. I actually read this in the yellow wallpaper in an English class years ago, and I could
Wow.
never, ever remember the name of this story, but I always have thought about it. And I've always, kind of with more of the more morbid part of it, I always thought, she was just so happy she was free, and then she died because she was so sad she wasn't actually free. I always, for probably like 20 years since I first read it, have sympathized with her.
Okay, so you can sympathize with her. I'm just wondering, because this is the kind of question I ask my students, is did you kind of feel her emotions, or did you feel her senses as you're reading through the story? Did you kind of go through her experience in a secondary or vicarious way?
Yeah, I just thought it was so interesting. I felt like I was kind of in the room with her, like looking
Really?
out the window, like someone, knocking at the door. I picture her like, going down the stairs to like a foyer, and then her husband is standing there, and then it's just like, oh no.
Yeah.
And then the story ends to me.
Yeah.
Like that's it. Even though there's a few words after that, like I feel like I weirdly like kind of end my part of it when she dies.
Interesting. So you were kind of going along with what she was experiencing. Yeah, and this is interesting, right? Because it's a very traumatic experience for her, of course, both her own death, but also her husband's alleged death at the beginning. So what is it like to be a reader reading about trauma in a vicarious way? You're not actually going through the trauma, but you're kind of, as you were just saying, participating in it. Is it powerful for you, uh, or what's your experience as a reader?
I know for me it's powerful, especially because this story stuck with me for 20 years.
Yeah. Yeah, but what makes it so powerful? Was it her story, or the way it was told, or her physical experiences, or her emotions?
I think the story and the time period where it's from makes it just kind of unique for the person and the situation and the feeling, and being public about it.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I guess it's not public, but we see it, publicly.
Yeah. So you remember it obviously made a huge impression on you. Other people, was this a powerful emotional experience for you, or was it kind of removed in time over 100 years ago?
It was so real I pulled away from it. I am
wow
a wife in my 50s, and I know probably someday my husband will die of a heart attack. He has high blood pressure and other issues, and I didn't really want to go on this journey. And I was mad at the author. But when it got to the point where she was happy about the freedom, and I was like, oh, that's kind of helpful that I might be able to view the eventual loss of my husband in a different light. So then I was happier about it. But yeah, I didn't like, I pulled off because I didn't want that. That's too real for me. That's too close.
Yeah, I understand. Yeah. But what you just said is a wonderful therapeutic principle of reframing your fears or your thoughts potentially in a therapeutic way. Do you think that is therapeutic for you, or is it too?
Oh, yes, I
Okay.
do. And then also the reflection back of, okay, is this real in the world that I've seen? Have I seen women actually experience this? And then to look and see that I have made it even more therapeutic.
Wow. So you think it is therapeutic for you?
Yes, but it like I almost didn't go there because I was getting really mad.
Oh, okay. This is a complex question, but do you think this story is therapeutic for the main character, Louise Mallard?
I'm kind of placing myself in here. I don't think it was therapeutic for her until she felt that warmth. I think it was traumatic for her until then.
Yeah.
And when she felt that warmth, it started to take a turn. I didn't know where that was going.
Yeah,
I'm not sure she knew where it was going either.
No, she was very puzzled and baffled by it. You're right. I like the way you put it took a turn. That's what I talk about with these works, is whether it's a poem or a short story, things take a turn you weren't expecting. And overall, she goes through a journey that she doesn't know how it's going to end up. And we as readers go through a journey we don't know how it's going to end up. But it makes an impact on us, and it makes a huge impact on the characters. So those are wonderful points. Anybody else have anything to add about your experience reading the story, especially from a therapeutic or any kind of angle, based on what I've been talking about with bibliotherapy and how reading can help you in certain ways?
I guess I just want to say, like, when it started to turn, I was like shocked, and I was like, wait, maybe I just like wasn't listening enough. And I like went back and like looked at the words and was like, wait, no, that is what's happening. Like,
yeah,
she is, she is like finding some relief in this. And then I was like, well, why was I shocked? Because like this is probably something that people, especially in that time frame and even now, do feel. So I don't know. I thought the shock was very big for me.
That's interesting. So you're not only kind of going along with it, but you're kind of monitoring your own response. Why is she feeling that way? So that's a complex thing about literature, is I think we participate in the character, but we're also evaluating the character as we go. I kind of like that because we're not completely the character, but we're a reader of the character. So I think it gives you, what I've experienced as a teacher is it gives students some distance, so they don't have to go into places necessarily that are so difficult, but they can comment on them from afar. It's kind of a safe space in a way for therapeutic reflections. Do people agree with me on that point? when you read, are you kind of more objective about it than your own experiences in life, or?
I can see where that would be the case for most people, but I have extremely high empathy, and so it's not detached enough usually.
Okay, so you really get into it and you live through it.
It's why I don't watch the news. I'm not
Uh-huh.
interested in listening to the violence that has occurred this particular day.
Right.
Yeah, so with my clients, I advise them to, if they are overly sensitive to certain things, to be careful what they expose themselves to.
Good point. Good point. Well, we're running low on time here, but I guess I don't have a ton of time to have you do the revising of the end, but let's say I did ask you to do that. If you were going to rewrite the ending in a creative way that maybe changes the outcome for her, in other words, she doesn't die, what kind of things would you talk about at the ending? I'm just interested. I know that's a challenging creative question, but what would you have happen to her, or what would she do?
I think she'd be depressed for years before she could become independent.
Okay. So you'd really lengthen this story out into maybe a novel about her difficult depression. Very good. Okay. Lauren says, she would tell her husband that she was leaving, as to still experience her freedom. Okay, so you would actually have her confront the husband there. That's creative, and say, I want to be free. So it's a moment of truth for their relationship. Anybody else? What would you have her do?
Maybe her husband's dead, and she starts some type of business in which she employs widowed women.
Very good. Very creative. Yeah, she becomes a teacher. She uses her trauma and her independence to help other people. That's really good. I like the creativity of that. So you can see how this works. I think, if we had more time, we could do more of an in-depth rewriting of the ending. If you're interested, you can do that. My students really love to do that, and they get very engaged in it, and just love the creativity of that kind of exercise. So I think what I've showed you here is you can go really in depth into your exploration of bibliotherapy and creative writing. I'll just make a couple more points. If I can get back my, let's see, do I share?
Yep, you just push share. And then also, while John's getting up his PowerPoint there, I just want to remind you that the certificate of attendance will come in the chat. And the way that that works is that you go through, you answer the survey questions, and then another link will pop up, and that will be your certificate attendance. You can download it, you can save it, you can send it on to your supervisor and do what you need to do with it. So just after John makes his last couple of points here, then that will go into the chat for you. John, do you need help pulling up your PowerPoint?
Yeah, I can't seem to find it. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. If you go into the arrow, so remember if you have it up on your screen already, so put it up on the screen. And then just push the arrow that says share.
Yeah. Well, I can't find it, but I do remember
I'm
what
sorry.
I wrote. And basically what I wanted to say is that, you know, if you're interested in these topics, that, yeah, there's a new online program at Alverno, and you can take these courses. They're very asynchronous. They're they're very short, but they get more into depth into these kind of activities. And so
did you send me the PowerPoint at one point?
No, I don't think I did.
Well, I can tell you this, that if it's the same link that you want them to peruse that you sent me, it will be in the constant contact that they received from their listserv. So they did get that information.
Oh, yeah, and Amy was so kind as to include that link to the new courses online at Alverno. And I just, overall, I'm just really excited about this field and feel it's something that Health Humanities can do, you know, to help people in many different situations, and not just medical, but also to help them establish a connection in their community and to break the pattern of isolation that has been so prevalent in our community due to the pandemic. And so I'm going to keep working to spread the word about bibliotherapy and to try to inject it into various fields like the libraries and healthcare settings and just various avenues. And I think you can see the benefits and the potential just as individual readers, but also in group settings. It's very powerful. So I hope you agree with me for that. With that, after experiencing, you know, a taste of what's going on there. So, you know, thanks again very much for inviting me. And does anybody have any quick questions? Somebody says I have a general question.
Hi there. Thank you so much. This has been very interesting. I think it could be a very practical thing that, you know, people can do outside of their regular therapy. But I'm wondering, so when the stories are being talked about, and you know, what are the supports look like? Like if someone were to, you know, be triggered by the stories, you know, they already have mental health issues, they're already struggling, and you know, reading and kind of resurfacing and bringing those emotions to the surface in an environment that doesn't have a clinical, you know, professional involved, how would that look, and would that be more damaging to the person if the clinical support wasn't there and they begin to, you know, have an episode, or you know, it really triggers them in a negative way?
Right. Well, I haven't had that experience. I've been teaching for a while, but I tend to pick things that are pretty not traumatic. I mean, this story would be a good example. I guess it could trigger somebody, but you see how we're doing it. We're working in a very analytic mode. And it is true that sometimes when we're reading difficult narratives such as The Fault in Our Stars about terminal illness. It can bring up deep emotions about people who have lost loved ones there. But you bring up a good point, but that's in a way, you know, the kind of materials I'm picking are not going to be the same things that professional bibliotherapists are going to use that really go after a certain mental illness in an extensive way. It's more a general way of thinking about health and illness that people can plug into as they want or don't want.
Great. That's also wondering, so would you then say that there might be different levels of, like if people have a huge, trauma background, would they not want to go to one like this and maybe go to one that is hosted by a clinical professional?
Maybe so. I mean, I think you're bringing up very wonderful points about the real world applications here. And I think it depends on what you want out of it. A lot of the advocates of clinical bibliotherapy say that this is not a replacement for psychoanalytic or cognitive behavioral therapy by any means, but it's a nice kind of supplement. So that's as high level as it gets, but it also is used to treat depression and various other illnesses, but it's not the main form of treatment, but it's a supplemental or kind of an additive treatment.
More tools in the toolbox, right?
Exactly.
Yes. Well, very interesting. Thank you so much. I've never heard of this before, and it's very innovative and unconventional, but I think that sometimes can be a great, method for people. So thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
John, did you see the question in the comment, is the class teaching others to facilitate bibliotherapy, or is it for them to go through the process themselves?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's mostly on going through the process themselves. What do you learn? I also use it to teach things like symbolism, like in this story, the clouds and so forth, and themes. So it's a kind of clever way to teach English literature and literary analysis. But what I try to do at the end of the semester is I ask them, hypothetically, a lot of my students are going to be nurses. So I ask them hypothetically, what might you do in the nursing profession or in social work to somehow come up with a creative idea for helping your clients or your patients? And the things they come up with are wonderful. And so in a way, it's like just putting in the seeds perhaps of future applications to facilitate kind of a creative therapeutics that they're still thinking about. And the nursing student I'm working with now, she's going into psychiatric nursing, and there's a long history of using bibliotherapy in psychiatric nursing that she's exploring, and she came up with a wonderful 8-week, very detailed plan of how to do that with an outpatient depression patient.
Well, I want to sneak this in before somebody asks another question, but I just want to say thank you for coming today, John. It was really very special, and it's such a great way to end the year of the story of us. And so I'm glad that I don't even know how I got introduced to you or how we got connected. No. Somebody said something about something, and all of a sudden I was on the phone with you.
Right.
But did you see Derek's rewrite of, he really thought that through, of the ending of the story?
I'd rewrite it so that the arriving of her husband and him walking through the physical door would trigger the opening of an emotional door that gives her an avenue escape from being bound and feeling abandoned. So that's wonderful, very detailed, very creative. And in other words, it provides an opportunity are you saying for both of them really to transform their relationship? Yeah, I think, is that what you're saying, Derek?
He might not be on
Be
still.
there, okay.
But they're because they got their certificate of attendance in the comments section, and sometimes they have another meeting to jot off to. So I wanted to make
Sure.
sure they got it.
Yeah, that's really wonderful. I love that. And you know, the kind of complexity there is, it's like taking the complexity of the story in a new way. It's wonderful.
Yeah, I love that too. I think that's my favorite part of, because I can't tell you how many stories I've closed the book and I'd be like, that is not the way I would have ended
Right.
that story. The disappointment.
Yeah.
So real.
No, I know. But in a way, it gives you a prompt to write your own story and
Right? Yep. Yep.
to use your imagination. And it's amazing how the students like that. I still am amazed by it. I think in a lot of their majors, they don't get a chance to be creative. So the classes that I teach in that way, just it gives them a sense of maybe entertainment or relaxation that they're not getting otherwhere in other classes.
Yeah. Yep. Agreed. Yep. I loved it. You know, and like I said at the beginning of this conversation, I've been waiting for this all year because, well, since spring, since we chatted, because this is the first year I've ever heard of bibliotherapy. So what a great opportunity it was to learn something new.
Okay, great. Yeah, I really enjoyed it, and let me know if there's other ways I can help or communicate with you. It just seems like a wonderful group and a wonderful training opportunity for them.
Thank you very much.
We have so many different interesting topics.
Yeah, for sure. Yep, it's a good group. And as you can see there, they are not shy.
No.
They'll just chit chat away. Okay, well, if you're still on, everybody, you know, thank you so much for joining us today. And also, you know, have a good and happy and safe holiday season. And we'll see you in the new year. We'll kind of wait here just for a moment and see if anybody has anything pressing that they were too embarrassed to say, maybe in the meeting. But I can tell you how many people are left here. Oh, we're only down to 29 folks, so I think we're okay.
Amy, it's Mary.
Yeah.
This was much more exciting than my finance meeting that I had to go to.
I would assume so.
Yeah, I missed it.
You missed the whole thing?
Yeah, I was in the finance meeting.
I'm sorry. That does not sound exciting. Now we'll have to
No.
rewrite your story, Mary. And
That's
the
right.
the revision is that you get to come to this meeting. Pam, did you miss it too? Pam, you're on mute.